What if we've misunderstood ISO20022? What if the narrative we've been holding onto is only half the truth? What if the movement of money, the future rails, the global standards, are shifting in ways that are bigger, deeper, messier than we expected? When I say this, I'm not trying to scare you. I'm trying to be real with you, because the more I look at XRP, XLM, XDC, HBAR, Quant, ALGO, all the so-called ISO tokens, the more I realize something. This isn't just a list of chosen coins. This is a restructuring of global finance so massive that none of us fully understands it. Not yet. Not completely. And that's where the fear creeps in. The quiet kind of fear that hides behind your bullishness. The what if I'm missing something kind of fear. Let me paint a picture. Imagine standing in a train station in a city you've never been to. Loud announcements echoing. Crowds rushing. Signs in a language you barely understand. Yet somehow you know instinctively that the train you need is coming. You just don't know which track, which direction, or what time. That's ISO20022. It's the new language of global finance. The new messaging standard. The new operational framework for how trillions of dollars move every day. Everyone keeps saying, this is bullish for XRP. Or, this is why XLM will explode. Or XDC is the backbone. Or HBR will run the whole thing. And maybe they're right. Maybe the stars align exactly the way we hope. But what if the story is bigger than a pump? What if ISO20022 isn't about choosing winners, but about building a system where multiple networks quietly interlock? Where each token plays a role we didn't anticipate? Where utility is not a hype trigger, but a long, silent takeover? Because here's the truth nobody wants to admit. We don't fully know how the new financial system will behave once the switch flips. We've seen pieces. We've seen simulations. We've seen partnerships. But the real architecture, the invisible pipes behind the scenes, is still forming as we speak. And that's where everything gets emotional. Because crypto investors, especially the early ones like you, aren't just buying tokens. You're buying hopes. You're buying futures. You're buying escape plans. You're buying the idea that life will look different when the system finally shifts. But what if ISO20022 isn't the rocket launch people expect, but the bridge to something even bigger? Let me slow down because I can feel your pulse picking up the way mine does when my mind starts spinning. We've been told this story for years. ISO20022 is the future. The banks will switch over. XRP will be the liquidity king. XLM will run global remittances. XDC will be the trade finance backbone. HBAR will secure the enterprise layer. Quant will interconnect everything. And honestly, it's a beautiful blueprint. Satisfying, clean, predictable. The kind of story that lets you sleep at night because it all makes sense. But real life isn't clean like that. Real technological revolutions aren't clean like that. And if history has taught us anything, it's this. The real winners are usually the ones playing a role nobody sees until the moment everything clicks. So when I say we may be wrong, I don't mean we picked the wrong projects. I mean we may be underestimating the scale, underestimating the timeline, underestimating the complexity, underestimating how intertwined this system will be, underestimating how big the real transformation is. Think about this. What if ISO20022 isn't the final destination? What if it's the on-ramp? What if it's the operating system, not the victory screen? And if that's the case, then holding XRP, XLM, XDC, HBAR isn't about catching the ISO pump. It's about understanding that the world's financial infrastructure is being rebuilt while most people are busy laughing at crypto. It's messy. It's uncomfortable. It's slow. And it's bigger than any influencer, any hype cycle, any prediction video. That's why you're here. Not because you believe in a pump, but because you believe in a transformation that feels inevitable even when you can't fully explain it. The whisper in your chest isn't doubt. It's awareness. It's your mind trying to tell you that we're watching something historic, something larger than any one asset. And yes, we may be wrong about ISO20022, but maybe being wrong isn't a loss. Maybe it's a sign that what's coming is even bigger than what we've been told. ISO20022 isn't just a standard. It's a language, a new grammar for money, a completely new way for banks, payment providers, governments, corporates, and settlement networks to speak to each other. And once you realize that, something hits you in the chest. We might be wrong about how ISO20022 impacts crypto, not in a bearish way, but in the way people misunderstand a storm because they only look at the clouds, not the pressure underneath. Let me say something that might sting a little. ISO20022 doesn't choose winners. It reveals them, and that's where the confusion starts. Because for years, people have talked like ISO20022 will flip a hidden switch that magically activates utility for XRP, XLM, XDC, Hbar, and the rest. But the truth? ISO20022 is more like unlocking the door to a house that's already full of moving parts. Pipes, wiring, ducts, machinery, all working quietly out of sight. And here's the part nobody wants to admit. Utility doesn't explode on a schedule. Adoption doesn't follow a perfect chart. And global financial systems don't move in a straight line. They shift sideways in circles, forward, backwards, all at once. Like watching a city rebuild itself while the people inside are still living their everyday lives. And that's exactly what's happening right now. While everyone online is screaming, ISO pump, ISO moonshot, ISO switch, the real world is doing something far more complex. Adopting the new financial language slowly, painfully, methodically. And this is where it gets emotional because deep down, every holder of XRP, XLM, XDC, Hbar, Qnt, ALGO knows this isn't just an investment. It's a belief that the world is getting ready for a system that doesn't break every time someone wires money across borders. And maybe the biggest mistake we've all made is thinking ISO20022 is the destination instead of the start. Because the moment global finance begins speaking the same rich, structured, interoperable language, the real juggernauts, the networks that can actually move value, finally step into the spotlight. Not because of hype, not because of moon boys, not because of influencers, but because the infrastructure suddenly makes them impossible to ignore. But here's where we may be wrong, and where the truth is actually more bullish than people expect. ISO20022 doesn't guarantee the success of XRP, XLM, XDC, Hbar, Qnt. It just sets the stage for their strengths to finally matter. Think about that for a minute. XRP's settlement speed, XLM's cross-border efficiency, XDC's trade finance compliance, Hbar's enterprise-grade structure, Qnt's interoperability. These things already existed. ISO20022 doesn't create them. It amplifies them by removing the communication bottleneck. So maybe the mistake wasn't believing these assets would thrive. Maybe the mistake was believing they would thrive instantly, on a timetable like a movie release date. Because the way the new financial system is forming, it doesn't look like a sudden takeoff. It looks like a pressure build. Slow, invisible, persistent, until one day the value doesn't jump. It rebalances. And rebalancing happens fast. Think of a balloon quietly filling with air. Nothing happens. Nothing happens. Nothing happens. And then suddenly everything happens at once. That's how systemic changes work. Slow build-up. Sudden snap. So what if we're wrong about the timeline? What if we're wrong about the trigger? What if we're wrong about which asset gets activated first? What if we're wrong about the idea that ISO coins pump together? Because here's another truth. The new financial system won't be a single highway, it'll be a web. Multiple networks, multiple rails, multiple settlement layers, multiple use cases. And the winners will be the ones that serve a function so crucial, so irreplaceable, that the entire system bends around them. That might be XRP for liquidity, XLM for remittances, XDC for trade documents, Hbar for enterprise state storage, Qnt for internetwork interoperability. Or it might be combinations we haven't even considered yet. We may be wrong, but what if being wrong means our predictions were too small? What if ISO20022 isn't a pump catalyst, but a restructuring catalyst? What if we're not looking for fireworks, but for a quiet transfer of power from outdated systems to digital ones. You know that feeling you get when you sense something big is coming, but you can't explain it to anyone because it sounds too insane? That's the feeling the ISO20022 transition is giving a lot of people right now. A quiet hum in the background. A shift in the air. Like the system is preparing for something it hasn't fully revealed yet. And maybe that's because ISO20022 is not a moment, it's a migration. A gradual unfolding. A world rewiring itself while pretending everything is normal. If there's anything we're wrong about, it's assuming we already understand the ending. But we're only in the opening chapters. This part of the story, this shift, is the quiet kind. The kind that creeps in slowly, until one day you wake up and realize, wait, everything already changed. And that's exactly what's happening right now with XLM and XRP. Not next year. Not in the next bull run. Now, but the scary part? Most crypto holders don't even see it. Because people are still stuck in price charts while institutions are busy grabbing infrastructure. Let's unpack this in the most human, simple, and brutally honest way possible. You've heard influencers say it. You've heard analysts scream it. But here's the truth. The real truth. XLM and XRP were never built to compete with regular crypto projects. They were built to replace financial plumbing. Read that again. Not improve. Not upgrade. Not support. Replace. The same plumbing that moves salaries, cross-border remittances, interbank settlements, government funds, humanitarian aid, CBDCs, and real-time global transfers. Everything. These two networks were designed from day one to do the things traditional systems can't do. Move money instantly, for fractions of a cent, across borders, with no middlemen, and no friction. That is what the world quietly needs right now more than ever. And that's why institutions are making moves behind the scenes that most retail investors don't notice until it's too late. Let me show you. Everyone talks about crypto curing inflation, solving poverty, changing the world. But XLM, specifically the Stellar Development Foundation, didn't stay on Twitter talking about it. They went straight into the real world. Humanitarian corridors, digital aid delivery, World Food Program, cross-border remittances in Africa, Europe, and Latin America, partnerships with MoneyGram, integration with the USDC ecosystem. But here's the bigger picture, the part most people never zoom out to see. XLM is becoming the digital rails for emerging markets. The same markets that will dominate population growth for the next 30 years. The Western crypto crowd is still crying about ETFs and interest rates. Meanwhile, XLM is quietly building the future of everyday payments in places where cash is unreliable and banking access is nearly non-existent. And guess what? The next 1 billion crypto users won't come from Wall Street. They'll come from the exact region Stellar is already plugged into. People underestimate how massive that is. Because once a country's payment system runs through Stellar rails, switching off that infrastructure is almost impossible. It becomes part of the bloodstream. Let's talk about the giant, the one people love to hate, love to fight with, love to underestimate, XRP. For years, people said the same thing. Ripple is dead. The lawsuit killed them. No bank will ever use XRP. But the irony is painful. The lawsuit didn't destroy Ripple, it validated them. It forced Ripple to grow up, build stronger partnerships, tighten compliance, and expand operations quietly while everyone else was arguing on Twitter. And now, the entire financial world is facing a crisis Ripple was built to solve. Outdated cross-border systems, slow settlements, expensive correspondent banking, regulatory fragmentation, a global need for real-time liquidity movement. XRP is not a meme. It has never been a meme. It is a settlement asset positioned for a future where countries can no longer rely on the old SWIFT model. And here's what most people don't understand. Banks don't need to announce XRP usage. They just need to plug into RippleNet, and XRP can be used automatically for liquidity sourcing. That's the part people ignore. Ripple has already built corridors across Asia, Africa, the Middle East, and Latin America. All the building blocks are there. Institutions are already in position. The connections already exist. All that's missing now is scale, and scale comes fast once regulation clears the fog. Everyday crypto investors keep screaming, if XRP is so good, why isn't the price up? If XLM is doing all this good, why isn't it pumping? Simple answer, utility assets move after the infrastructure goes live, not before. Bitcoin pump? Narrative-driven. Memecoins pump? Hype-driven. Ethereum pump? Retail plus speculation. But XLM and XRP? Their price is tied to something very different. Transaction volume plus enterprise adoption plus real institutional flows. They don't pump because an influencer said something. They pump because a billion-dollar liquidity corridor went live, or a government adopted a new cross-border system, or a global payments network switches rails. Utility coins move when the plumbing switches, not when Twitter shouts. Here's where things get serious. There are certain tells, signals, that always appear before a major crypto revaluation. And right now, both XLM and XRP are flashing the same signals. Institutions are integrating the rails without announcing it. Software integrations often happen months, sometimes years, before public statements. Once the rails are in, switching tokens becomes effortless. Liquidity corridors are being prepared quietly. You don't build corridors unless you plan to use them. And these corridors are not built for 10-cent transactions. They're built for billions. And guess which networks are compliant, fast, and institutional grade? XLM, XRP. This is the key. Once the global conversation moves away from charts and into infrastructure, everything changes. XLM and XRP aren't speculative bets. They are the pipes. And pipes always get paid. Most retail investors will miss this entire transition because they're looking for fireworks. But the real wealth, the generational wealth, doesn't come from hype. It comes from the boring, quiet parts of the system that everyone depends on. XLM and XRP are not lottery tickets. They're infrastructure bets. Infrastructure takes time to build, but once it's built, it becomes unavoidable, unskippable, unreplaceable, and unstoppable. When the world needs to move value instantly, cheaply, and across borders without friction, there are only a few networks capable of doing it at scale. Two of the biggest, XLM, XRP, and the rest of the world hasn't caught up yet. But when they do, the price won't move slowly. It will reprice violently and permanently. Because once global liquidity starts flowing, utility doesn't trickle, it floods. So here we are, the final stretch. If you've made it this far, take a breath, because the most important part comes now. The shift we've been building toward, the one that's been quietly forming behind closed doors, inside boardrooms, across global payment networks, is finally reaching the point of no return. And XLM and XRP sit right in the middle of that tectonic plate movement. Not by luck, not by hype, not by retail speculation, but because the global financial system has outgrown its own infrastructure, and these two networks already built the replacement. Let's wrap this up clearly, simply, and truthfully. Every major government, central bank, and institution is preparing for the same thing. A new digital value system, tokenized money, real-time cross-border payments, instant settlements, digitized financial instruments, stablecoins moving across regulated rails. And here's the critical piece. This new system can't run on Bitcoin, can't run on Ethereum, can't run on memecoins. It needs low cost, high speed, regulatory compliance, interoperability, enterprise-grade security, liquidity efficiency. There are only a few networks on Earth that meet that criteria, and XLM and XRP are two of the strongest. When this transition flips from testing to deployment, the demand for real-world liquidity won't be slow or gentle. It will be instant, and violent, and massive. Billions flowing through corridors. Banks finally switching rails. Governments adopting stablecoin frameworks. Remittances riding on blockchain rails without people even knowing it. This is where the real price action happens. Not the hype stage, the utility stage. And we are so close to that moment. Most people will wait for confirmation. Most people will wait for a green candle. Most people will wait for CNBC to tell them the trend has changed. But by then, the run will already be halfway done. Because assets like XLM and XRP don't move because of influencers. They move because the world starts using them. And when usage hits, it hits hard. If you're already holding, this is your moment to do one thing. Pay attention. Stay focused. Stop getting shaken by short-term noise. Understand what you actually own. These are not coins. They are infrastructure layers for the next generation of global finance. And you're early, painfully early, in a moment that will not repeat itself. If this breakdown helped you see XLM and XRP differently, not as hype tokens but as future financial highways, then don't just scroll away. Hit that subscribe button, because the next few months will be chaotic, fast, and full of misinformation, and you need someone who cuts through the noise. Turn on notifications so you don't miss the next deep dive. Especially the ones where we track the corridors, the institutional plays, and the regulatory signals before they become headlines. And if you're holding XRP or XLM, drop a comment saying, "I'm ready," because when the switch flips, it won't be slow, it won't be gentle, and it definitely won't wait for anyone. You either see it now, or you see it too late.